one of the difficulties with doing a project anything like this size or complexity is finding and then also affording material to do it with. And I've never had much of a budget for this. When I was working full time, was not making a lot of money. With that in mind, I've ended up using a lot of like reclaimed and recycled material, which has been very good for the budget, and also is something that I feel quite strongly about doing, that it's in keeping with the traditions of this trade, and is environmentally responsible, and I could probably go on for a while about that, but it's something that I feel very good about doing. And the biggest example of that on Rosalind is actually pretty much the entire deck framing here. All of the beams, the carlins, ultimately hatch combings, all sorts of other things are all going to be reclaimed material from the Schooner Australia, which was part of Mystic Seaport's collection for a very long time, and fortunately when she was deaccessioned I managed to get hold of this material, which was mostly longleaf southern yellow pine that had been dry for nearly 50 years in a lot of cases. It had been in a shed. She had been partially rebuilt in the 1970s and 1980s with this then new yellow pine and some Douglas fir as well, and she never went back in the water, so it's just been in a shed since then. So it's air dried to equilibrium moisture content, and really, really beautiful stuff that I'm able to give a new life to, which I feel quite good about, and not just selfishly. So I have a lot of recycled material in the boat at this point. I have a lot from the Schooner Australia. Some of the framing of Schooner Australia was white oak that was usable for top timbers on Rosalind. There's offcuts from several other large projects that would have probably ended up as firewood. There's all of the side deck beams are actually decommissioned telephone pole spreaders. All of the black locust framing in the boat and everything else, the mizzenmast step, like there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's all black locust, which I felled all of that and milled most of that myself. So yeah, very small budget, but getting it done. At this point I've got pieces of like hardware and trim off of 2 fiberglass boats that were demoed, 1 wooden boat that was demoed, actually no, 2 wooden boats that were demoed. Free is great, and I'm never going to say a bad word about Free. It's my favorite one, but it does always come with a price of some sort, be it like I have some frames in the boat that were cut from, or milled rather, from fussocks that were intended for the Charles W. Morgan, but had a major defect in them, so they weren't able to be used. It was a large defect that was too big to be fixed with a Dutchman effectively, or whatever. The difference in scantlings are such that I'm still able to get a perfectly usable frame, sometimes even 2 out of such a compromised one for Rosalind at her scantlings out of these massive ones for the Morgan. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of milling. It's a lot of ending up with unusable material and or firewood. Similarly, the Schooner Australia stuff was all pinned together with 7/8 of an inch I think maybe originally Galvy, but now mild steel pins that were, some of the pins were like this long, and trying to get all these pieces apart, get these pins out, was a non-trivial task, which I did a lot of research and trial and error, and it was additionally complicated in that I was trying to do this during a time when I had been seriously injured at work. I did not have use of my right shoulder or complete use of my back either, or my knee for that matter. I was a bit of a wreck. Still am, but I'm better. It's fine. So ended up trying to having to come up with something that was not based on hitting things with hammers, which is usually how you get pins out of things or get big timbers apart, by driving wedges to like drive them apart. Wasn't able to do much of that at all, so had to build something that worked on hydraulic jacks, which is, I think, not revolutionary. I think a lot of people have come up with similar things for pulling keel bolts and what have you without mushrooming the heads of them, without damaging things. It's always better to pull than to drive stuff with a hammer. Yeah, I built something. It works. Let's check it out. What you need is some bits of steel. You do need access to a welder to build something like this. These are some steel brackets that I had lying about. I have no idea what they were originally for, but they were great for this. You could just as easily use other stuff, I'm quite sure. You could build something out of mostly rebar and little bits of plate or something. The main thing is to have two points for bottle jacks to push on, and some way of hooking over the head of the bolts that you're pulling out. Now, if the bolts do not have a head, as was the case with many of these, you actually have to weld something with a head on it onto the end of the bolt in question, which is a whole other thing that I did a lot of, which I will not be demonstrating right now. But yeah, basically the way this works is just you hook it over the head, and then get your jacks situated. That's pretty good. You need a little bit of blocking usually to get the heights right so that it's pulling on the head and you don't have the jacks wound all the way out. I like to wear a face shield because a couple of times it's pulled off and it flies a little bit more than I like, so if that happens, I like having something on my face. Ta-da! Now it probably looked easy because that took a lot of time and thought and building things that didn't work and building things that broke to arrive at this this easiness. It was not always so, and of course if you're having to say pull these out, you have to weld something, and what I usually did was I just got one of these ones that have a head cut off a piece, ground a really heavy bevel on it to give room for welds to be, and just did my best to stick it on. It's really difficult because obviously you can't actually get really good contact with that because there's nothing there. But you know, you grind all the rust off, you grind a really heavy bevel on this, and you just turn the welder up as high as it goes. You end up burning a little bit of the wood around, but does work. So, yeah, something like that. I hope that this will be encouraging for people, to encourage people to think that if they have a dream that seems quite crazy to a lot of people and even to them, that possibly you can do it. You can find ways of doing it. You always end up paying, but it doesn't have to be money. It can be time and it can be effort rather than money. There's material out there. There's people breaking down old barns. There's old barnwood. There's boats that, you know, are long past what's reasonable to restore, or even like important to restore. That could, you know, material from them could go on to something that's more special and more significant. There's a lot of good stuff to be had out of fiberglass boats too. Even if you're doing a wooden boat project, there's all kinds of good stuff. And you can go out, you can learn how to cut down trees, you can learn how to mill them yourself, you can have a sawyer come and mill them for you. There's so many ways of going about this that aren't just opening your checkbook. And I hope that that's encouraging to some people, that they could do something like this if that's what they want to. And you know,